Good morning. Last week we finished off with the Gemara in Kiddushin on page 1 of your Makairos there. We learnt the Gemara, where we see very clearly from the Gemara that women are potur. They are not obligated in learning and teaching Torah in the classical sense. Before we go any further, we should probably look at we will wait. We'll do the Gemara in Sota first, and then we'll look at the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch and get the basic halacha, the psak, and then we'll move on to the understanding. Okay? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarim.
Amen.
Okay. Now, a coffee and a Gemara, all is right with the world. We can go. Mishnah in Sota. It's a little bit left of field, and we're not going to go actually too much into, because I want to keep the pace and the momentum up a little bit. But the concept is, we are talking here, the Mishnah in Sota is discussing you all know what a Sota is, yes? And the question is whether if a woman has a zechus, if she has a merit, whether it in some way helps her. And the Gemara is discussing whether she would possibly have the zechus of Torah or not. Says Ben Azai, okay? It's the one just below the Gemara and Kiddushin on your sources, yes? Mm-hmm. Says, Mikanem Ben Azai, Chayev Odam Lamed es Bitoy Torah. A person, it's actually, if you begin to think about it, it's quite fascinating. A person is mechuyev, obligated to teach his daughter Torah. She'im tishteh, for if then she has to drink the water of Sota, Teidash has zechus Torah. You will know that the zechus of Torah will help her. What a fascinating background to the imperative and the obligation potentially to teach her Torah. But okay, that's what Ben Azai says. But it's a machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer here in the Mishnah says, Kol ha-melamed es bito Torah ke'ilu melamdo tiflus. Rabbi Eliezer argues with Ben Azai, and he says, no, a person should not teach his daughter Torah, because if you teach your daughter Torah, it is as if you've taught her tiflus. Now, what is tiflus? Now, the translation, the word tofel is something that is, generally speaking, we would translate as something that is insignificant, is the most benign translation, but we have to be a little bit more precise than that. We'll come back to that. Rabbi Yeshua Omer here in the Mishnah, Roitze isha bekav v'tiflus mitisha kabin uprishus. A woman would rather, generally speaking, have less materially, 1 kav, that's an amount, v'tiflus, together with tiflus. And here we're going to get the definition from its antonym, right? From the opposite. Yeah. Says Rabbi Yeshua, a woman would rather have 1 kav, that's a certain amount of materialism, of money, if you like, and tiflus, rather than having tisha kabin, a lot of stuff, uprishus. Precious is the opposite of tiflus. What is precious? Precious is, in English, it is asceticism, which means to be, to voluntarily desist from material or physical pleasures, most notably pleasures of the flesh, such as eating, drinking, and marital intimacy. That is what the concept of generally precious means. To be peiresh means to separate oneself, to have certain things which are permitted, but a person decides to disconnect and not to so heavily identify with physical pleasure, and instead to become more elevated and dignified and spiritual and slightly less connected to the physical pleasures of this world.
Not for everyone.
Kedoshim tihiyu, it is for everyone. News for you. Kedoshim tihiyu, prushim tihiyu. You let yourself in for that. We're not going to do it today. Okay. Big mistake, my friend. Kedoshim tihiyu, there's a mitzvah min HaTorah to be kodesh. It's a mitzvah.
But it's not Nazirim.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay,
no.
So maybe.
There's a mitzvah. You ever heard of the parish of Kedoshim?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, sorry. Kedoshim tihiyu is a mitzvah. Says Rashi, Purushim tihiyu. Because wherever you find Perishus min ha'aroyos u min ha'aveira, you will find Kedusha. And this is it's a separate topic. It's a related topic, but we're not going to go into it in any depth now. But in our context, it's really important. We now have some form of definition of Tiflus. Tiflus is the opposite of Perishus. So if Perishus is the voluntary separation from physical pleasures of the flesh, Tiflus is its opposite. Okay? Enough said. Immersion into physical pleasures of the world. And a woman, generally speaking, would rather have less material possessions if the other side of that coin, what went with it, was connection to the physical pleasures of the flesh, rather than having lots of stuff, but being disconnected from pleasures of the flesh. You hear that? That's what Rabbi Yeshua says. Now, let's have a look in the Bartanura. The Bartanura here says as follows. We'll do the Gemara in a minute. Says the Bartanura on Rabbi Eliezer, Tiflus chibur mishkav anoshim. Kind of says it all. Now, why is this bad? Why is it so bad that if you teach your daughter Torah, it is as if you've taught her, it's as if you've taught her Tiflus. If you stop and just translate and analyze, that's quite a fantastic statement. If you teach your daughter Torah, it is as if you have taught her the art, so to speak, of the pleasures of the flesh, kind of thing. Lamda Tiflus, what does that mean? Says the Bartanura, Shemitoich ha-Torah hi mevina armimus va'oisa dvareha b'hatznea kidichsiv ani chochma shochanti orma. Shlomo HaMelech tells us there is a connection between wisdom and, in English we say cunning. Schlau? Auf Deutsch ist das schlau? Das ist richtig? Ich denke so, nein? Cunning. Schlau sein. Was ist schlau auf Englisch?
Smart.
No. More than smart. Smart is as being devious, being sly,
You mean
cunning.
wisdom and intelligence?
No, I don't. I'll start again. Maybe my German is wrong.
Okay.
I understood that schlau is like sly. Not just,
Yeah.
it's like it's devious, where I can be smart
I would say-
to hide something from you.
You could be gerissen.
Maybe my German's no good. That could well be.
Gerissen.
Nicht schlau. Gerissen.
Gerissen is more like devious.
Devious, thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Also schlau. Also
Vielen Dank. Thank you. See here, I'm teaching you German. Okay, now.
Who's teaching who?
Okay. Now, back to the Bartanura. Zog the Bartanura. Shemitoich ha-Torah hi mevina armimus. The Torah itself will, from within the Torah, she will understand to be orum. When it says about the Nachash was orum mikol. He was the most cunning, the most devious, the most sly of all of the creatures. Torah, Chochmah, what comes with Chochmah, what comes with the territory, if a person is aware, smart, it is possible to use that. You can use it for the good, you can use it for the bad. And look what, and this is a big statement, not going to be very politically correct, but let's just translate the Bartanura. Shemitoich ha-Torah hi mevina armimus. She will learn to be strategic, tactical, sly. Va'oisa dvareha b'hatznea. And she will do what she wants to do. She will learn how to hide it. That's the Bartanura. In other words, now this really, we need to put this into contextualize it a bit, because women also have bina. They naturally have more bina. Less chokhmah, but more bina. And if you increase the chokhmah, ani chokhmah shochanti orma, you don't end up with more bina if you have more chokhmah. Think about that. There's a lot of depth there, but again, I have to hold myself back from giving it. It's not really a hashkaf shia, but it is still a very interesting statement. the assumption is that most women, and I think I need to, or many, if not most, women, by giving them more chokhmah, you are not fundamentally doing them a favor. And that's what we need to explore. Now, I know that's a big, bold statement, but that's what it seems to be now. It depends who we're going to paskin like. We have to see. Ben Azai says you should. You're chayav. Rabbi Eliezer says, notice, he doesn't say osur. He says, kol ha-melamed es bitoy Torah ke'ilu. He says it's as if you've taught them tiflus. And Rabbi Yeshua seems to be going along with him, and Rabbi Yeshua is saying, what does Rabbi Yeshua say? Let's see the Bartanura on Rabbi Yeshua. Roitza isha b'kav v'tiflus, says the Bartanura, Litain, she would rather have lizoin mezoinos mu'otim v'yehei tashmish motzoila. She would rather have access to the pleasures of the flesh and have less money. Mitisha kabinu precious, lifroish min hatashmish, hilkoch ein tov shetil Torah. Therefore, says the Bartanura, it's not a good idea that she should learn Torah. And it's interesting, the lashon that he uses, it's not a good idea that she should learn Torah. It will express itself in terms of teaching. Now, that is the Mishnah. Let's develop this and try and understand this a little bit further. Let's do the Gemara. The next, beneath this, you have the Gemara here, Daf Chaf Aleph on the base. The Gemara says as follows. The Girsa that we have in the Mishnah is Kol HaMelamed es Bitoy Torah. Now look at this. Look at this Girsa here. Kol HaMelamed es Bitoy Torah melamdo tiflus. Look at the way the Gemara quotes the Mishnah. Can you find a difference?
No kilu.
Very good. No ki'ilu. So it's much more definitive. It's a more of an absolute statement. You will be teaching her tiflus. The Gemara says tiflus al kadatach. Really? Look at Rashi. Limda tiflus al kadatach. V'chi Torah tiflus korela. Can you really define Torah as tiflus? Of course not. Elo emo ke'ilu limda tiflus. So although it didn't have it as the girsa in the Mishnah, but it says emo, what it means is ke'ilu limda tiflus. Says Rashi, shemitoicha hi mevina armumis v'oisa dvareh b'hatznea, which we saw already in the Bartanura. That's probably where he got it from. From the Torah will give her armumis, and she will therefore do what she wants to do, which is not necessarily good, b'hatznea. Fine. Omer Abavo, my Talmud Rabbi Eliezer. Where does Rabbi Eliezer derive his this idea from? D'chsev ani chochma shachanti orma. Kivan shenichnasa chochma ba'odam nichnasa imoi armumis. When a person learns Torah, armumis, cunning, enters with it. Says Rashi a little bit further on, when on Rabbi Yehoshua, Roitz Isha b'kav v'tiflus imoy mitisha kaven precious. If you look at the Rashi, it's underlined here. Lefichach Rashi says, well, let's do that Rashi. Roitz Isha b'kav v'tiflus chafetza lizoin b'mzoines muatin v'yehei tiflusa motzuila b'tashmish mites kabin precious lifresh minatiflus lefichach ein toiv shetilmoid Torah. Again, this is where the Bartanura got it from. It's not a good idea. Let's see Tosfos. Says Tosfos, Yerushalmi on Ben Azai. Ben Azai says chayev. Says Tosfos, Yerushalmi de Ben Azai deloiker Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. That this statement of Ben Azai, that a person is chayev to teach his daughter Torah, is not like Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, the Dorish. Hakel esa'om ho anoshim anoshim ataf. Why did we have the mitzvah of Hakel? As you know, once every 7 years, the Melech would read from the Sefer Torah in the Beis HaMikdash, and everybody would have to come, the mitzvah of Hakel. And the Torah says, Hakel es ha'am, anoshim v'hanoshim v'ataf. Anoshim ba'u lilmoid. The men came to learn. The women came to listen. It doesn't say the women came to learn, it said the women came to listen. That is what Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says. So therefore, says the Yerushalmi, you see that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah is another one that argues with Ben Azai. Not just Rabbi Eliezer, but Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah also argues, because he doesn't say, according to Ben Azai, it should say the women come to Hakel. Why? To learn. Doesn't say that. They came to listen. Venira de Pirush de mitzvah lishmoya hanoshim kedei sheyedu lekayim hamitzvah. So if it's not to learn, Tosfos has the problem. Why do they have to go? The kids, we know, the Gemara says, why do the kids have to go? Litin schar lemiviehem, to give reward to those who bring them. That's why the kids have to go to Hakel. They're not old enough to absorb, to listen, but they go in order to give schar to those who bring them. Fine. They are the object in order to get schar for their parents. But women, why do women need to be there? Rabbinerseminar says to listen. What do you mean to listen? But they don't have to learn. So why do they have to listen? So it's listening, says Tosfos, is they listen and now it's utilitarian. It's functional. It's so that they know what to do. The listening of the women for Torah is kedei sheyedu lekayim mitzvah. So that they should know how to keep Shabbos, that they would find out from listening. Interesting. But that's not called learning. That's not the same as lilmoid. In other words, you already hear what I said to you the other day, if you remember from the Beis Halevi, that the learning, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah and just knowing what to do is not the same thing. Okay? Fine. Let's have a look at the Meiri. The Meiri says over here, next source a bit further down, says the Meiri, Rebeleza oima hamelamed is bitter term melamdo tiflus ve'ein baris v'o keilu elo davka melamdo tiflus. He had a different girsa without the keilu. That's why the Gemara asks tiflus. The Gemara says no. It's as if it is teaching her tiflus. And the Gemara says shemitoy chavonoso biyeser migidro hikoino armimus ma'at. When you give a person knowledge that they are unable to put into the correct context, if you teach somebody something that they are unable to understand, then they get armumis, they get this cunning. Ve'ein sichlo maspik lahavono haruya. Their seichel will not be sufficient for the correct understanding. Vehi svura shehisiga. She'll think she understood it, said the Meiri, umekaskeses kefa'amoin, and she'll go about blowing her own trumpet kind of thing. Laharos es chochmoso lakol, showing her chochma off to everybody. I have to really hold myself back from being very politically incorrect here. But one occasionally does see women. Be careful how I put this. No, I don't. I mean, I'll just say, you cannot compare, and that doesn't say. We will talk about this in some more detail and depth later on in this series. But of course, there are women who are incredibly smart. There is no question about it, no question, and there are women who are capable of learning and understanding Torah at a very high level. There's no question about that. There always was, there always will be. And again, I will keep repeating that, generally speaking, we are not talking about whether women may learn any aspect of Torah. This is not what we're discussing here. We're discussing is whether they should be taught, as a matter of course, broadly speaking, exactly the same course of learning that is the syllabus, the core syllabus and curriculum in yeshivas and in kollalim for men. That's the question. There always were in Klal Yisrael, and there always will be smart individuals, but it's the exception rather than the rule, broadly speaking. Not because they are not intelligent. Their intelligence, generally speaking, works in different ways. And by the way, you see this. You want to see the really, really interesting thing in the STEM fields, right? STEM, you familiar with STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so-called STEM subjects. You take the most egalitarian socialist economies, Norway and Sweden, the Scandinavian economies that have been egalitarian in terms of equality of opportunity for well over 2 decades, where they have pushed the liberal agenda of giving access to women in all these so-called male dominated subjects of the so-called patriarchy, the STEM subjects, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mechanism.
Right.
The fascinating thing is, look at, and we will present the statistics. Look at the statistics 20 years later, and you find that, broadly speaking, women are still choosing to go into the different types of careers, such as nursing, such as those that are more in a nurturing, human related role, rather than the STEM, which is subjects, which is what the great Scandinavian experiment was destined to do. So you could say it's a failure. But one thing it shows for sure is that there is a difference. Newsflash. Men and women, broadly speaking, their brains work differently. They are different. We're different. We think differently. And the Rabbeinu Shalom, in his prescription for Hashlamas HaNefesh, prescribed Limud HaTorah for men in a way that he did not for women. And to then distort it into being a whole, that the issue is about equality and treating them the same way, is a distortion of Torah and its values at its core. But more of that later. And you do see this idea. The Meiri is saying that women who have some knowledge, trumpeting that knowledge as if they are on a par with real Talmidei Chachamim and Lamdonim. Yeah. Anyway, so let's move on to now the Rav Vosner in Shevet HaLevi. Look on page 8. Brings this Meiri. Is a tshuva here from Rav Vosner, and I'm not sure whether we should, how much of it we should go through, but let's just look at the bit where he quotes the Meiri. I made a note of it and I can't find it now. Hold on a second. No, we'll have to come back to it because I can't see where. Here, oh yeah, found it. Okay, the right-hand column, about halfway down. V'zel Hashem Rabbeinu HaMeiri Soita Chaf Aleph. Got it? Yeah? So he quotes the Meiri, Ke'ilu Malam do Tiflis Rotzelema Devarim Tiflim Shemitecha Vanosim B'Yesem Migidra Hikoin Armumis Ma'at Ve'ein Sichla Maspik LaHavonas HaRa'aya Havona HaRa'uya V'hi Svura Shehisiga Makaskesses Kepamoin Laharis Es Chachmos Alakol Adkan Hine Higdir HaMeiri Isur Halimud Behesber Nifla. Says Rav Vosner that the Meiri has explained the Isur to teach women Torah beautifully with an incredible explanation. That if we give her access to ideas which generally speaking and naturally are above her capacity, if she is unable to understand these matters truly and deeply as they ought to be understood, she will think that she has understood it. Her Rebbes have told her, you are now a Rabbah, you are now you can have smicha, whatever. What will end up coming out is a perverse and incorrect interpretations of Torah. And he finishes off, the Meiri finishes off and says, quotes a Gemara Yerushalmi, which says, Yisarfu divrei Torah v'al yimosru l'noshim. The Torah, divrei Torah should be burnt rather than handing them over to women. That's a Yerushalmi. Pirush, what does that mean? Sheyesh bazeh elboin b'Torah sheyihiyu divrei Torah nesunim l'shikul das hanoshim. It is fundamentally will be a bizoyon for Torah if the interpretation of Torah would be handed over on an equal basis to da'as noshim that is not designed to handle that. Tosfos does say that this idea that the Gemara Yerushalmi says that Yisorfu Divrei Torah should be burnt, it's derech guzma. Doesn't mean literally we're not going to burn Torah chas v'shalom. Okay, let's begin to have a look at the halacha. Let's have a look at the halacha. Let's begin to have a look at the halacha, the way that it's brought down in Rambam and Shulchan Aruch. Okay, we've seen the Gemara.
Which page is that?
Just a second. I think here, page 3 and 4. Let's have a look at page 3. Here. Says the Rambam. This is Hilchas Talmud Torah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Yud Gimel. Isha shalomda Torah yesh lo schar. A woman that learns Torah, of course, gets schar. Aval eina k'schar ha'ish. She doesn't get as much schar as a man. Mipnei shaloi nitztava. She is not commanded to learn Torah. V'chol ha'isa dava she'eina mitzuva olav. And anybody who does anything for which they are not commanded, ein schare kischar hamitzuva she'aseh lepochus mimenu. You cannot get as much schar, you don't get as much schar as the person who is commanded to do it, but less. V'af al pi sheyesh lo schar. Listen to how the Rambam is fascinating, the Rambam's formulation. He first tells us that if a woman learns Torah, she gets schar, she gets reward. And then he says, af al pi sheyesh lo schar. Despite the fact that she gets schar, tzivu chachamim shelo yelamed odom es bitei Torah. Chachamim commanded us not to teach our daughters Torah. Mipnei sheroiv hanoshim, because most women, notice, most women, ein da'aton mechuvenes lehislamed. Their mind is not, I'm searching for the right word, directed to being taught Torah. It generally speaking is not a good fit. Ve'hen moitziin divrei Torah ledivrei Havai lefi anius da'aton. And this is ala Yerushalmi, ala Meiri. And they will bring out and they will convey words of Torah into Shtuyot, I'm afraid I have to say, Divrei Havoi, Shtuyot, Lefi Anios Daiton, on the basis of literally the poverty of their das. And there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is Roiv Noshim. Now maybe it's 60%, maybe it's 70, maybe it's 80, you can, maybe it's 90. We can argue the toss. That's not the point. But the point is that Chazal are saying, and remember this is not about whether they will have access to Torah, so much. It's not, or rather to be fair, it's not exclusively about access to Torah. It is about whether we proactively, a person goes and teaches his daughter Torah. And therefore Chachomim, this is the Lashon of the Rambam, Tzivu Chachomim. This is how he's paskening. The Chachomim were mitzaveh not to teach your daughter Torah. Omru Chachomim, now, finished. Then in the same halacha he says, Omru Chachomim. The Rambam is paskening not like Ben Azai, he's paskening like Rebbe Eliezer. He quotes, that's very clear. We saw from the beginning part of the Rambam, he's not paskening like Ben Azai, the Chayev Odom. He's saying, Tzivu Chachomim not to. Interesting. Where's this tzivui, by the way? Where's it Tzivu Chachomim not to? The Rambam, let's be very clear. The Gemara, the Mishnah that we saw was, Ben Azai says, you're chayev. Chayev adam melamed es b'tei Torah. Rebbe Eliezer says, kol ha-melamed es b'tei Torah ki'ilu melamdo tiflus. He's making a statement, a broad policy statement, a halachic statement. If you teach your daughter Torah, it's as if you're teaching a tiflus. We understand from that it's kind of not a great idea, but the Rambam has taken the idea of Rebbe Eliezer and he couched it in language of Tzivu Chachomim Sheloi. Mm-hmm. You see what he's done? The Chazal have commanded us not to. He then goes on and quotes after he's done that. And we could question, why does he need to do that? He's used the words of Rebbe Eliezer to tell us not to teach one's daughter's Torah. He then goes on to say, Omru Chachomim kol ha-melamed es b'tei Torah ki'ilu melamdo tiflus. B'ameh devarim amurim. B'Torah shebal peh. This statement is with Torah shebal peh. Aval Torah shebichsav lo yelamed oisa lechatchila. Torah shebichsav, you shouldn't teach them lechatchila. Ideally, initially, you shouldn't go and teach it to them. But ve'im lomda, is it limda? I presume it has to be. But if you did teach it to her, it's not ve'im lomda. It can't be if she learnt it. It must be that if you taught it to her, then eino kim malamda tiflas. It isn't as if. So there's a two-tier system here. It's not as if you taught her tiflas. So he starts off by saying, tzivu chachomim. The Chazal have instructed us not to teach our daughter Torah. And then he says, if you teach your daughter Torah, it's as if you've taught her tiflus. And then he says, Bameh dvarim amurim, that is as if you've taught her tiflus. That is with Torah Shabal Peh. Torah Shebechsav, don't do it. Don't do it. But if you do, it's not as if you taught her tiflus. And my question to you is this second part of the Rambam also referring back to the first part, where it says, Tzivu chachomim, not to teach her? Is that tzivui, not to teach her, going on Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh? Here's a question for you. You should be able to answer me that question if you've read and understood the Rambam.
So it looks
Go on.
like it's on both.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
So the Tzivu chachomim, not to teach her, is going on the Torah Shebechsav as well. Because it says, Torah Shebechsav, lo yelamed oisa. He should not. So he's not retracting back from the Tzivu.
So
that stays in place.
And the tzivah is also not because of tiflut, but because there will be none if it's Bedi Evet Ktav, we said. Right?
Very
so
good.
So then we said
very
it's not
good.
even about tiflut.
Gabi, that is a great ha'ara. That's one of the best ha'aras I've heard in a long while. That's good. That is really good. Kol hakavod. Gabi, let me just speak that out. Mm-hmm. If the entire basis of the tzivu chachomim shaloi lelamed is bitoy Torah is only on the basis of being melamdo tiflus, then given that he says that if you teach your daughter Torah shebechsav, it's not kimelamdo tiflus, then there should be no lo yelamed lechatchila. So you see very clearly from here that you're thinking good. I like it. That's a straightforward lamdusha, simple, clean, elegant, but a good reading and interpretation of the Rambam. That's what it seems to be. So there's something else afoot. There is something else going on besides for the Malamdo Tiflus element, and maybe that's why, and clearly that's why the Rambam separates them into two things. You've got a separate thing is, don't teach your daughter's Torah. Why? Ein da'ato mechuvenes. He says why. Tells us why. Because broadly speaking, Roiv Hanoshim are not able to appreciate, to understand Torah correctly, and Torah, this is not actually about the women. See, here's the other thing. Let me just try and to address this. It's a bit subtle, but I think it's really important. This is actually not personal. This is actually has nothing to do with women. This has everything to do with Torah and nothing to do with women. It's really important to appreciate this. It impacts women. And ultimately, of course, it says something about women and their capacity to understand. No question about it. But the response, if that's the right word, not that we necessarily need to respond, but the way to demonstrate that this is not an anti-women or something, chas v'shalom, a denigrating women campaign in any way, shape or form, it has nothing to do with that. This is about Torah. The problem is that Torah will suffer. And if Torah suffers, of course, people suffer. This is Torah-centered, because they will be motzi divrei Torah, divrei havai, lefi anios daiton, and that's why don't do it. And even if it won't be kimelamdo tiflus, fine. But Torah will still suffer, and therefore you should not do it. Why he tells us, in fact, we can even flip it round now and ask. So why is it that if he tells us, why does he tell us that if you teach them Torah shebechsav, if you teach a Torah shebechsav, it's not kimelam tiflus? What difference does that make? We could even leave that as a question. Okay, we'll have to stop here for today. To be continued tomorrow. We'll look at the Shulchan Aruch.